We are just so pleased and thankful for the work that the two of you do, and are so thankful that you are here now.
Thank you.
So I want to begin by asking you, and since we're in the spirit and the season of Thanksgiving, what are some of the traditions or anything that you and Paula and your family and circle of friends do to celebrate Thanksgiving and this time of year?
Well, it's interesting. You should ask that this year, because for the first time, we're not going to have our daughters with us. They're busy doing other things. Drea and Raphael will be in Mexico, where Raphael's going to do an Ironman.
Wow.
And Maya is wisely staying in Los Angeles rather than driving or flying down here. So we're having friends at our abode, which is across the street from the jail. And I won't say more about that, but so we gather friends and family together, and we celebrate and give thanks.
Okay. Do you have any traditions on Thanksgiving, something that has to be done for it to be an official Thanksgiving celebration?
Yeah, having a meal works.
That does work, yes. So around my family, my dad, being the authoritarian that he is, he makes us actually say one thing that we're thankful for while the food is sitting on the table. And
Getting
we're all
cold.
Just getting cold, and just the smell and the aroma is whetting our appetite. We have to say one thing that we're grateful for. Do you have such traditions?
We try to do that every day, lift up the high point of the day and the low point of the day and talk about it.
Okay.
We do that on Thanksgiving as well.
So talk a little bit more about that. So each and every day, you and Paula kind of spend some time together talking about and thinking about the blessings and the things to be thankful for each and every day.
We do spend time together every
That's good.
day.
Married couples probably should spend some time together.
That's one of the ideas that makes it strong. And it's sometimes a challenge. For instance, yesterday I said, well, there's several things that are the high point of my day. What's the highest of the highs? And you begin to see how many highs there are in the course of a day. So it's a good conversation starter.
Mm-hmm. So how long have you been an ordained minister?
I can't do arithmetic real well, but I think it's 39 years.
39 years.
Yeah.
So in those 39 years, have you learned anything about
about
life, about gratitude, about Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Okay.
Life and gratitude go hand in hand, and it's the positive. I'm trying to think of a clever phrase, but don't worry about the what is it? Don't worry about the big stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff. And P.S. It's all small stuff.
Right. And P.S. It's all small
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So just give thanks wherever you are, whatever's going on in your life.
Right. So which is basically the idea of what Jesus is talking about in this sermon, this portion of the Sermon on the Mount.
Absolutely.
So what did you think when we chose the scripture verse and you read it, Ross? What did you think?
Well, it's be thankful wherever you are, and to understand that God, the Spirit, the Holy Other, whatever you want to call it, is within in not only us but all of creation. Mm-hmm. So that's what I thought about.
That's what you thought about it.
Yeah.
But what about that part in it that said, "Don't worry about tomorrow; that God will provide"? Now, this morning you had at the 8:30 service, you had a very profound thought on that I thought maybe you might share with us, about that part of the scripture that said, "Don't worry about tomorrow, for God will provide."
You were talking about Ping?
Well, you said something about being untrue.
Aha. Well, the reality is that life is good, and we need to rely on God but participate with God. And the story I told is back in Vermont. we have mud season every year, the end of winter, beginning of spring, when the earth thaws out and the snow begins to melt in earnest, and there's water everywhere, and it settles on the low-lying dirt roads and becomes a quagmire. And most people stay at home during the mud season, but every once in a while you got to get out and go where you need to go. And Elmer Derby had to go from the farm to the village, and as he approached the village, he saw a hat lying on the road up yonder, and as he drew near, he observed the hat to be moving, which gave him some trepidation. And so with some hesitation, expectation, consternation, he picked up that hat and found the head of his friend and neighbor, Walter Wheeler. And it set him back a bit to see a head lying on the road like that, because he didn't know if it was attached or not. So he said, Foster, you're in trouble, ain't you? And he looked up and said, No, Elmer, I'm not in trouble, for I still have my horse under me. So if we have the horse, if we have our relationship with God and relationship with each other, then the mud can't get too deep. The reality, of course, is that the reality is that story is a silly story, but the mud does get really deep. And then what do? We're glad. I'd be glad if I was Foster to have Elmer come along and help dig me out, because we need to work at it. We can't just rely on the magic of God taking care of everything.
Right. So that's part of the life of Jesus, and really the overall arc of the biblical story is there are blessings all around us. There are,
if you notice them.
If you notice them. Yeah. So kind of the story of the Hebrew children in the wilderness, manna rains down from heaven, but right. God doesn't drop the manna right in their lap. Instead, God puts it in the field adjacent to where they're camped out, and so they actually have to get up and walk over and gather the blessing. And so it's sort of a co-creative or a co-blessing existence with God.
Right. Paula reminded me of a different experience. When we were in school in Santa Fe, we did what's called a vision quest. And it's 4 days out on the mountain alone with a jug of water, or several jugs of water, but no food, no interaction with other people, direct interaction. But so we went out and 4 nights, 4 days in the wilderness of New Mexico is a little challenging, but we found the manna, we found the power in the relationship with the physical earth and with the animals around us. We talked to the animals, so to speak, and thanked them for loaning us their space and not harming us and teaching us how to live in nature and on and on. And we had buddy piles where we're separated, but in the morning I would leave a note, and in the evening Paula would leave a note, and we'd be able to read it. We wouldn't see each other, but we'd read it. And that just gave us the sense of being connected with the whole. It was a powerful experience of finding, not only did God put the manna in a different spot, but as sustenance that we hadn't thought about. Who wants to write a silly note every day? But that became an important thing. Talk to the animals? How's that work? But we did it, and it was uplifting and just marvelous. We'd do it again in a heartbeat.
But it's the small gestures that really filled the soul and filled up your spirit during the Spirit Quest. Yeah. So I know that this year and over the last couple of years, you have, as you have said in your Vermont story, somewhat been in the proverbial mud.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, you haven't felt like you haven't had necessarily the horse hasn't been underneath you. So can you talk a little bit more about the mud that you have sort of been experiencing in your life over the last 5 to 10 years?
It's been a muddy road in some regards. In 2008, I went to the doctor and about an issue, and the doctor walked in and totally unrelated to that issue without saying good morning or anything, he said, "You have Parkinson's disease." Oh, how nice. Thank you very much, Doc. And there's been an adventure, kind of like Yitzhak Perlman, who did a concert in 1995 in Avery Fisher Hall in New York. He's a violinist. And he started his solo part of the symphony, and a string, one of the 4 strings in his violin snapped. Ping! And it ricocheted around the auditorium, and people thought, oh my God. Because it's one of those moments you can't play a violin with 3 strings, right? And he said, just a minute. And he sat there with his eyes closed, and his hand went up and down the neck of the violin, and he adjusted the ebony pegs a little bit. And then he signaled to the orchestra to start again, which they did. Came to the solo, and he played it more beautifully than it had ever been played before. And the house came down in this tearful applause. And he said at the end, sometimes it's the artist's task to find out how to play as much music as you can with what you have left. And my string, one of my strings, broke when the doctor said you have Parkinson's. And rather than crawl into a hole or find a muddy road, I have been working to find out how to make as much music as I can with the strings that I have left. And I think all of us have times when the string gets strained or snaps, whether it's ourselves or someone in our family or whatever the issue might be. But it's important to figure out that balance, how to rely on just the presence of God and the interaction of God, not only directly with me, but through you or through the grass or through the sunshine or whatever. God, we're here because God has us here. It's not just incidental.
Right, right. So as you have been playing music with your 3-stringed violin, where have you sensed the magic, and where have you been able to make beautiful music? What has kept you going? What's offered you a spirit of gratitude in the midst of that hardship?
Well, I don't know what to call it hardship, is just the way things are. But for instance, the church and ministry committee in which we serve, a lot of it is, oh my stars, do we have to do that again? But on the other hand, this
It's awful. I hate it. I hate every
But
Thursday.
this is a work of God. It's not perfect, but God is among us, and we wouldn't know each other very well except through that.
That's true.
And we know each other, and we care for each other, and if there's a concern in one of our lives, we share it. And yes, it's mundane, but it's where God is working. And so I find out where God's working.
But this morning you mentioned another aspect of your life that you felt like was really offered you some beautiful aspects and music.
Music. I like to sing. Some people with whom I live don't necessarily have the same appreciation for my humming, but I like to sing, and I do. I take a lot of pictures and do drawings with charcoal and pencils, as was mentioned with the children. And I like to write. I write often for the Connecting Voices, which is the online newsletter from the Southern Conference of the Southern California Nevada Conference of the United Church of Christ. Say that 3 times fast.
I know. I just had to take a drink.
Connecting Voices is there, and for instance, this last time I wrote an article about Rich Freeman from Chula Vista, who's retiring, and so I do a lot of writing like that, and drawing and pictures and singing.
So staying engaged, staying busy, the work that you're doing, even though it can be mundane, finding God in the midst of all of that
Is important.
Yeah.
And Parkinson's often affects the vocal cords, and so you have to put out more air to make the same amount of noise, and the muscles of the vocal cords get stiff. And so if I sing, even if it's for my own amazement, it helps. I'm working with God, and I make the most of what I can, and I prolong the life of my vocal cords by singing, by talking, by sharing, all of that.
So as in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus encourages people to relax and to not worry so much about tomorrow, that God will take care of us in the midst of our lives, even when hardships and difficulties, prevail. And we have so many of those things going on, big and small, on a micro level as well as a macro level.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight as a minister, as someone who has been in the ministry for 39 years? What is it, and how is it that you get through and tackle and deal with all of those things?
All of those things?
All of those things.
It's just
in like 2 more minutes.
Oh, as Mark was talking with the children, it's a mindfulness, just being aware of the opportunity of encountering God in everything we do, and the mundane and the exciting and the incidental, and being aware of our impact on what we choose to do, the impact it has on other people around the world. For instance, if we use more resources than other people, then they don't have the resources to use. So just being aware that you showed a video at the other service with our little drop doesn't make much difference, but together we can make more of a difference.
Right. So in these last couple of minutes, you shared with me over the phone a story about how your family is there to support you, and what a wonderful blessing that is, about going to the restaurant. And you did. You went to a restaurant, yes.
Yes.
Can you? I think that would be a great place to end in terms of sharing some thoughts about the support that you get from your family and from your community.
We were with Drea and the older daughter, and Raphael, her boyfriend, helping them move into their new apartment. And at the end of the day, we went out to dinner, and sometimes I have more of a challenge to walk from point A to B than other times. And that evening was pretty challenging, and I every once in a while freeze, not cold-wise, but my muscles just, you say move foot, and the foot doesn't move, but the leg does it, and I begin to fall. Raphael and Paula caught me 3 times on the way into the restaurant, just walking from the door to the table. And there's nothing quite like being caught before you fall down. And then at the end of the meal, I got up and walked out as if nothing has ever happened to me. I don't know if God healed me for that moment, intervened. How about tomorrow, God? But that was a wonderful support. It was no big deal. They were there. What were they going to do? Watch me fall? Cringe. Oh, he fell down. Too bad. They just automatically reached out and supported me when I needed it. And I think that's the kind of striving we need in the local parish. When something happens, I know nothing's happened challenging in your life, but in the life of other people out here who have real issues, we support them. Or in the bulletin it says, if you have pastoral emergencies while Daryl's in Texas. Do people come from Texas?
Nothing good. Nothing good comes from Texas.
Call Mary Sue Brookshire.
Right.
She will catch you. She will support you, and you know that, she knows that. It's just a bond that we have together, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. I just think that was such a beautiful story of when we are in need and when we feel like we're about to fall or actually falling,
Yeah.
that someone was there to catch us.
And I didn't have to say, "Will someone please catch me? I'm about to
Sure,
fall." They
right.
just happened.
It just happened.
Organically.
Right.
Yeah.
So this idea that being aware of our blessings, having a sense of gratitude in our life, and yet at the same time having this support and this family and these friends around us to catch us when we are falling or when we find ourselves in the mud up to our neck, I think is really at the heart of the Sermon on the Mount story. And I really appreciate you kind of enlightening us today. As we close this part of the service and the sermon part in this conversation, which has been lovely, and thank you so much. I was wondering if you have a final thought from all the wisdom and years of your life and your ministry.
Put your foot out and trust that the earth will come up to meet your foot. And a short poem, which is "Come to the edge." It's too high. Come to the edge. I might fall. Come to the edge. So I came to the edge, and she pushed me, and I flew.
Thank you, Ross. I really appreciate it. Blessings and peace to you this holiday and Thanksgiving season.
Thank you, brother.